2010 through 2015 Lexus RX350 alternator replacement. I'm Brian Essick from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out the alternator. I'm going to be installing a Denso remanufactured alternator. I will link up the alternator and all the tools that I use in this video in the description. We're going to get started by removing all these plastic covers. There's 3 of them. We're just going to press these little tabs inwards, and then you pull up and the clips will pop out. So you're going to follow around the perimeter of all these panels and remove the clips. And once you get the clips all removed, you can pull the panels off and set aside. You're also going to want to remove the top engine cover, so you can grab these in the corners and lift straight up. It's just held on with rubber grommets. So you're going to lift up all 4 corners, and now you can set the panel aside. Once you get the top engine cover removed, the next step is to disconnect the negative battery cable. So loosen up the cable end here, and once you get it loosened up, pull it off and tuck it off to the side. You want to make sure that it doesn't come back in contact with the post. So now you're going to want to get the front of the vehicle off the ground and remove the right front tire. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands. You want to get it up high enough where you can crawl underneath the vehicle, but low enough where you can still get on top and work from up top. So once you got the right front wheel removed, you're going to need to remove this inner splash shield here, and it's held on with a couple 10mm bolts. So you're going to remove these 2 10mm bolts, and once you get these 2 bolts removed, on the inside of the fender well is a clip holding this plastic panel on here. So you won't be able to pull it off until you flare this fender well back, and the inside there will be a plastic little clip holding it on. Right there, you can see it there. The easiest way to do that is to go underneath the vehicle, and we're going to take off this lower plastic cover here. So we're going to remove the 10mm bolts and clips around the perimeter of it, and we're going to pull this lower shield off and set aside, and then you can flare the fender out and get to the clip. So once you get that lower shield removed, then you can flare the fender lining out like this and easily get to that clip and pop it off, and then you can remove this panel. Once we got the cover off, the next step is to remove the belt. I'm using an extra long ratcheting wrench here to put on the tensioner here. It has a 14mm head, and we're going to ratchet that tensioner over counterclockwise. You can use a regular ratchet and socket or a long wrench to do the same thing, or a serpentine belt tool. So once you get it on there, you're going to torque it over counterclockwise like that, and that's going to spring the tension off. Now you can go ahead and remove the belt. Don't worry about the routing. I will provide a diagram later on in the video on how it reroutes. So we need to get to the bottom bolt of the alternator, which is right behind the tensioner here. To get that off, what I do is I take a 6mm bolt here, and what we do is we torque this over, and there's a hole on the tensioner, and there's a hole right here that lines up right here. So we'll torque the tensioner over and slip the bolt through the hole on the tensioner, and it'll slide into the hole on the mount right there, and that'll hold the tensioner out of our way and spring it off to the left. So now, as you can see, I got the bolt through, and it's holding the tensioner off to the side. Now you can see the bolt and get access to the bolt right there on the bottom of the alternator. So we're going to remove that 14mm bolt. If you have ratcheting wrenches like this, you can get in there and get to it, or a standard ratchet will remove that bolt. So go ahead and back that bolt out. Once that bolt's removed, we're going to go back up top, and we're going to start removing the front grille here. And there's a couple clips here in the corners here. You're going to remove these plastic little clips. There's one here, and then you're going to flare this rubber molding back, and you're going to pull the clip out here. You want to be careful when you pull the molding back, not too far. Just pull it back just far enough to get the clip out. Then there's going to be a clip here in the middle, and then on the opposite side here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remove these 2 clips here, one here. And once you get the 2 clips removed, now you're going to pull the grill straight outwards, and at the bottom of the grill, you're going to reach in here and pull the bottom of the grill out towards the front of the car. And there's a couple of little catches on the bottom, and the grill will pop off once you work it all the way across. Now that you got the grill removed, we're going to start making room to get the alternator out. And to do that, we need to get the core support out and the cooling fans down below out to get access to the alternator. We're going to be removing the upper radiator hose, so you're going to need a bucket underneath the vehicle to catch some coolant. And then we're going to get started by removing these 2 10mm bolts here and taking this air snorkel out. There's going to be some vacuum lines here on the side that's mounted on there. You're going to pop those off, and also on the back here. And we're going to lift this snorkel out. Once you get it unbolted, you can go ahead and pop the vacuum hoses off, and then you can just work this air snorkel out and set aside on your bench. So once you get the top air snorkel out, there's a lower piece that goes to it too. There's a 10mm bolt holding it on also. You're going to remove the 1 bolt. Once you get the bolt removed, you can pull the snorkel out from the bottom of the air box and set it aside. Now we're ready to start removing the upper radiator hose. And before I do that, I'm going to reach down below here at the very bottom of the radiator, and there's a tan colored petcock here. We're going to turn that counterclockwise and open that up, and we're going to drain a few ounces of coolant out the bottom. We don't want to drain the coolant completely out, just enough to where when we take the hose off, it doesn't spill all over the place. So just a few ounces, and then you can close it off. If you take the radiator cap off while it's draining, it will drain out a little bit quicker. So go ahead and remove the cap, drain a few ounces out of the bottom, and then close that off. Now if a little bit of the coolant drained out, we can remove the clamp, slide it back, and then I use a little pick tool here to work it around the radiator hose that gets stuck on their neck. Go ahead and work that free, and then you can pull the hose off, and then what I do is I just tuck it back here where it's out of our way. Now that you got the upper hose removed and tucked out of the way, we're going to remove the one bolt right here on the coolant overflow bottle here, the reservoir. Before you can lift the bottle out, you need to take the little vent hose here that's on the radiator neck here and pop it out of its little holders here and pull it off the neck here. And now you can lift the whole bottle up, and now you can just take the bottle out and set it aside. Now we're going to work on getting the fan out. We're going to unplug the electrical connector and take the wire loom that's held onto the fan itself, remove that. And I'm going to show you a little trick for removing these wire loom holders. What you do is you take a 10mm wrench like this, and if you slip it around the back of the wire loom holder and press it on, it'll press the little tabs on the wire loom holder, and then you're able to reach back there and pull the wire loom off. Using this little technique makes it a lot easier to remove these. So once you get the fan unplugged and the wire looms popped out of their little catches here, you're just going to take the wiring harness here and flip it over here off to the side and tuck it out of the way for now. Now at the bottom of the fan shroud is a transmission cooler line that's mounted onto the little bracket here. We need to pop this little catch here open. I just used a little pick tool and kind of flared it and give it a little pick, and it'll flare it open, and then we can take this transmission cooler line out of the little holder here and just push it inwards towards the engine. Now that you got the transmission cooler line disconnected from the fan shroud, we're going to take the 10mm bolts here at the top of the fan shroud and remove it. There's going to be one on the left and one on the right side. Remove those two bolts, and once you get these two bolts removed, there's this little tab here. You're going to squeeze these inwards, and now you can take the fan and pull it or push it in towards the engine, and it'll pop free like this. Now we're going to start working the fan out of the vehicle. So you're going to have to push your fingers here and push the hoses and push the wiring harness and stuff kind of out of your way. So I have the fan shroud pushed inwards towards the engine to clear the radiator neck. And then I'm on the driver's or passenger side here, I'm kind of working around the AC line, kind of pushing it lightly, and then working the fan shroud and assembly upwards. And you kind of work left, right, because it kind of gets snagged on something on the left, snagged on the right. And you just take your time and you can lift the fan out like this. Now that the fan is out, we have a lot more room in here and we can see the alternator, but we don't have quite enough room to get the alternator out. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on getting the core support out. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the two 10mm bolts here, and then we're going to go on the opposite side and remove the two 10mm bolts here, and then we're going to follow this bracket down here at the bottom. There's a 10mm bolt down at the bottom. We're going to remove that. The easiest way to get to that bolt on the bottom here is to go through the bumper right here, and then you can get to that 10mm bolt. So we're going to remove that bolt. Once we get those all removed, now the core support is loose, but before we can go ahead and take it out, we need to unplug the horns here. So there's an electrical connector on the back side here. You'll squeeze the tab and pull the electrical connector off of the horn here. And then on the driver's side here, there's another horn here. So you're going to squeeze the tab, pull the electrical connector out here. And then we're going to follow the wiring harness down here at the bottom. And then we're going to use that same technique with the wrench and put it on the wire loom holder here and pull the wire loom off. Now that the core support is free from the wiring harness, we're going to take the core support and lift it up, and we're going to flip it towards the engine here. The hood latch and cable is still going to be attached to it, so we're just going to flip it in here. And what I did was take a bungee cord and I strapped it across the engine and then hooked it over onto the hood strut there, and that held the core support inwards. We're going to make sure it's not resting against the radiator. Now we can flex the radiator back a few inches, and that gives us plenty of room to get the alternator out. The service manual recommends that we take the radiator completely out, but there's no need to take it completely out. Now we have plenty of room to get back here. So we're going to unplug the electrical connector here, the main power supply to the alternator here, and then squeeze the electrical connector and pull that off. And then there's a little bracket right here with a 10mm bolt. We're going to unbolt that, and then the wire loom holder here, we're going to pull this little tab and slide the wire loom holder off. We want to create as much slack as we can, so unplug the wire loom holder, and then right here there's a little tab here you can pull back, and then you can slide this off like this, and that gives you a little bit more slack. And if you need to, you can unplug the cam sensor and the wire loom holder up a little further here, and that gives us just enough room to get the alternator out and work this out. Also, I recommend that you unplug the AC compressor that's a little bit below the alternator. If you reach below, you can unplug that too. A tip for you is to take a piece of cardboard like this and slide it between the radiator right here, and that'll prevent anything, your tools or the alternator, when you pull it out, from making contact with the fins on the radiator and damaging that. I accidentally damaged the radiator before taking the alternator out, so now this is a little tip that I use. Now you can go ahead and take the top bolt of the alternator out. It's a 14 millimeter. You're just going to take it out. You may have to push the radiator hose downward to get it out. Now there's a little L bracket on the back of the alternator that we need to get off. If you use a mirror right here, you can see it. So on the bracket, there's a 12 millimeter bolt that we need to remove. You can see it right here with the mirror. You can also go from underneath the vehicle and you can get to it really well. So this is the bracket right here. You can see at the very back of the alternator, it's a little L bracket here. We're going to get that 12 millimeter bolt off. And the way I do it is I use an extension and a 12 millimeter socket and just slide it in here just like this. And if you look at the angle, you can see it. So we're going to take that bolt off. You can also go from underneath the vehicle looking up towards the bottom of the alternator, and you can see the bracket. You can get to it from underneath also. It depends on how you want to do it. So I'm going to crack the little bolt free with my little cordless ratchet here. I definitely recommend that you look from underneath to determine which way is easiest for you. For me, this is the easiest way to do it. So when I went to take the nut off, it came out with the stud and everything. It's not supposed to do that, so we need to separate this and put the stud back in, but we'll do that once the alternator is out. So now we can take a little pry bar and pry right here, and we can pry the alternator off its little mount here. And once it's off the little mount, we can start working the alternator out. Now the wire loom is going to be held on to that little bracket that we started to take off on the bottom there. So as we start taking this out, what I did was I flexed this radiator backwards like this, and that gives us plenty of room. And you pull the alternator out a little bit, and you get it at an angle right here, and there's that wire loom holder that's held on that little L bracket back there. And we use the wrench technique that I showed you earlier to pop that wire loom off the bracket. So I'll take the 10 millimeter wrench, put it on the wire loom holder, press it on there, and then pop the wire loom off the L bracket. And then once we get it off the L bracket, now you can flex the radiator back, and then we can take the alternator and pull it up and out of the car. If your stud came out with, like mine did here, we need to separate the nut from the stud, and then we need to go back down inside here and reinstall that stud. It has a little Torx socket that you can put on there and thread it into the block there. So put that back in. Now what we're going to do is take the little L bracket and transfer it over to our new alternator. Once you have the bracket transferred over, now we're going to take the alternator and feed it down into position. And we want that little bracket to stab onto that stud. So when you put it in there, we want to slide it down in there first, and then we're going to plug that wire loom into the bracket first, and then we'll line up the stud here on the L bracket, and then we'll line up the top portion of the alternator over the bracket right here, and then we'll put the top bolt through. Once you get it pushed on there and mounted on the stud, you put the top bolt through, and we'll thread it in a few threads. We don't tighten it down yet. We want to leave it loose. And then we'll go back underneath, and we'll put the 14 millimeter bolt here in, and we'll start that a few threads and leave it loose. And then we'll go from underneath. Is probably the easiest way to restart the nut on the on that little L bracket here. Is if you look up here, you can see it right here. So I'm going to reach over the top here and start that bracket. And you can tighten it down from underneath here, or you can go back up top and do it with the extension like the way I took it off. So go ahead and start that nut and bolt and tighten that one up. Then you can tighten the bottom bolt on the bottom of the alternator. Now that we got the two bottom bolts of the alternator tightened, we can go ahead and slip the belt back on. The tensioner is already torqued over, so we're just going to follow this diagram and route the belt around the pulleys. And the tensioner, like I said, is already torqued over, so you can slip the belt on. And now you can take your wrench and lightly pry it over and pull that bolt out, and then release the tension, and that'll tighten the belt up. And then we can go back up top and tighten the top bolt down. Now we can go ahead and hook up all the electrical connectors for the alternator, and all the wire loom holders, the cam sensors, everything. Put that all back on. Once we get that all resecured, now we can take our radiator core support here, bracket here and flip it back into position and line it up with all the rubber tabs and stuff, and start the bolts on the left and right side. Start the bolt at the very bottom, plug in the horns, make sure they're all plugged in, and put the wire loom and connector down at the bottom, all plugged in, and there's a clip right here that we need to plug back in. Once we got all that re-secured, now we're going to start working on taking the cooling fans here. They have these little slots here at the bottom of the cooling fan, and they mount on these slots on the at the bottom of the radiator down here. So you're going to slide that fan in until they line up with those slots on the bottom. So we're going to work the fan in. So you want the bottom of the fan towards the inwards towards the radiator, and the top of it flared outwards to clear the neck. And you just slowly lower it down, and you have to kind of push things out on the left and the right side. You also want to make sure that you take that cardboard out. If you leave it in there, your car is going to overheat. Now once your fan's back into position, you just make sure that they're stabbed on the bottom down there. And once they're you're confident that they're in the little catches at the very bottom of the radiator, then you're going to push the fan shroud in until it clips over to the little clip right here and give it a little squeeze. Now you can start the top two 10 bolts and tighten those up. Then you can take the wire loom harness here and plug in the fans and re-secure the wire loom holders. After that, we can take the upper radiator hose, put the radiator hose on and secure that. Then we're going to take the lower snorkel, put the lower snorkel onto the bottom of the air box, and make sure that the vacuum hoses are kind of pushed out of your way. Before we put the top snorkel on, air snorkel on, we need to make sure that we got the coolant reservoir back into position. So that has this little nipple right here. It's going to line up with this little rubber grommet on the radiator fan shroud there. So you're going to plug the bottle into that, start the 10mm bolt. Then you can take the lower cover here and put the 10mm bolt in there. And then take the upper one here and put it onto the air box and start the two 10mm bolts. And then make sure all the vacuum hoses are all routed into the correct way. After that, we can go ahead and take the grill, and you're just going to line it up with the tabs on the bottom and push it inwards until it locks into place, and then start the two clips on the top on the left and the right side, and then the one in the center right here. Now you can go ahead and put the top engine cover back on. It just has these little rubber grommets that mount on these little studs on the engine right here on the valve covers, and you're just going to make sure that you line up those rubber grommets with those studs, and you just line it up, and once you got it lined up, you just press downwards and it locks into place. Before we install these top engine covers, we need to take the radiator cap here off and top off the coolant, and we also want to top off the overflow bottle here. The plastic covers cover that all up, so top that all off. Then you can put the center cover on first, make sure that the battery cable is reconnected, and then you can put the two side covers on and put all the clips back in the covers. Once you get all the top covers reinstalled and all the clips reinstalled, then what we're going to do is we're going to go on the side and we're going to install the side cover here. And then once we got that installed, we can install the lower shield here with the clips and bolts around the perimeter. And then we can go ahead and install our tire and retorque the wheel to 76 foot-pounds. After that, we can start the vehicle up, put a voltmeter on the vehicle, make sure that the alternator is working the way it's supposed to. You also want to make sure that the engine runs long enough that the cooling fans come on and operate. You're going to have to reset the clock and maybe possibly reset the radio stations, and that'll complete the job. I will link up all the parts and tools that we used in this video in the description. I also wanted to share with you that I have t-shirts and mugs and stickers available. I'll leave a link for that also in the description. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.